Okay, test. 1, 2, 3. How's that? All right. Okay. I would like, next slide, please. I would like to emphasize that this is an information gathering session and that the committee has not completed its deliberations. Comments made by individuals, including members of the committee, should not be interpreted as positions of the National Academies. Once the committee's draft report has been written, it must go through a rigorous peer review process before it may be approved for release by the National Academies. Sound? Right. Therefore, observers who draw conclusions about the committee's work based on today's discussions will be doing so prematurely. Oh, good. Our ad hoc committee is tasked with providing advice to EPA and the nation to guide the future of cumulative impact assessment. Cumulative impact assessment, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a tool to help decision makers understand how different quote unquote stressors, which we'll define in a second, combine to impact health of people and communities. Actually, we can go to the next slide. Stressors include not just pollution such as air pollution, as well, but also other factors, including climate change, socioeconomic issues, and so on. In addition, health doesn't just mean lack of disease, but a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, including aspects of physical health, mental health, well-being, and livability. Next. Our committee will address a number of topics related to the science and the practice of cumulative impact assessment as listed on the project website. And those topics include those listed here on the slide. What are the stressors to combine? How will they change in the future? What makes a community more vulnerable to stressors? What are the barriers to strengthening a community's ability to respond to stressors? What future vision of improved community health and well-being do you envision? We're here today to gather your perspectives on these topics. Next slide. I want to remind everyone, those in the room and online, that the committee has already conducted an open session with our community and tribal liaisons, a virtual workshop with researchers, and an open session with state-level practitioners. After today's workshop, the committee will conduct 2 later sessions to gather additional community and tribal input. A virtual town hall with the community and tribal liaison group in December, and an in-person tribal engagement in Colorado in February. These activities will be live streamed via the project website. Next slide. I also want to note that the National Academies will provide a published summary of today's workshop, along with summaries of the other upcoming activities that I mentioned, the town hall and the tribal engagement. Video recordings of the workshop will be available on the project website. I want to emphasize that although today's event will include small group discussions, the summary will focus on the report backs of the committee that everyone will hear when we come back together in the main group. And those report backs will inform the committee's advice to the nation. Once again, thank you to all the committee. You'll have a chance to meet all the committee members when we break into small groups. It is now my pleasure to invite our workshop chair, Yoshi, to introduce herself and kick off work. Thank you.
Hello. Okay. Hi everyone. So I go by Yoshi. My full name is Cheryl Van Horn. I'm currently an assistant professor at Columbia University, but it's actually now public knowledge because everything's been signed. I'm going to be moving to the University of California at Los Angeles, starting January. West Coast is my home, so I'm excited to be back there. And then I'm very pleased to chair this workshop today, and really want to thank Chair Weishu, who put a lot of effort into this, and of course Joe and Raymond, who had yesterday we were part of a tour that began here. They took us through quite a few of the different areas through the rural parishes. We got to visit the Whitney plantation, And of course, I also want to thank the National Academy staff for helping us with all the logistics, because it does take a lot to put an event together. My task this morning was to really begin with reflections on our site visit yesterday, and really provide just overall, again, a community level area view, at least from our lens and our experience from yesterday. We put together, I guess, a little homage of what we were able to experience. And really by this, no means, you know, the few hours that we spent by no means is able to encompass everything that you and your relatives have experienced. But I think for a lot of us, it was very eye-opening because as some of our other members have said, we're very much used to seeing the data and seeing all of this from our viewpoint of lens of you know, air pollution data, or that place or that geolocation, but really being able to go and see it with our own eyes is something very, very different. And I think it gave us deeper understanding of when people say, oh, I live right across this aluminum plant or this other type of facility. It really, I think, put the context that we were missing into being able to hopefully inform the report that we're tasked with building. And so I don't remember what the numbers are. I think it's the locations, right?
Yeah, those number of photos that were there. So,
yeah, again, this is just from all of us from our task yesterday. I think there's probably go to the next slide. Okay, I think for a lot of us, even though maybe we've driven through here or visited, I think it was the first time most of the community members had been to the Whitney plantation, and I think that gave us even more historical context that a lot of the injustices that have been here even before the industry took over. And we got to see some of the exhibits of extractivism that again puts more into context that this isn't anything new that's been happening in the past couple of years. It's been an ongoing struggle. And just to reiterate, I kept calling this the aluminum plant. It's alumina. But again, I think it was one of those realizations that these are giant facilities, and that their emissions that they keep emitting. I think for a lot of us, we were able to smell. There's a couple of times when we're like, is that? I was like, what is that actually? You know, are we imagining things, or is this actually the smell that is being emitted off of these industries? I think for this one also, we learned a lot. I don't think this time, but I learned a lot about and I'm totally gonna get the name wrong, but it was the cocking process and the I forgot the hydro cracker. There you go. So having you there was very information gathering for how all this processes work. So thank you very much for all for that knowledge. And then really seeing again, and I know we've all from the committee, or even when we're looking at the data, we've heard that communities are right next to it, but really seeing that it wasn't just one home, right? These are all the communities that are sandwiched in between them. And I think one of our community liaisons made the comment of one of the upcoming schools being shut down, and made the comment that, you know, it's not the industry that's being shut down, it's the school that's being shut down. And in a just world, that probably shouldn't be happening. And then, yeah, last one. And I do want to end with the beautiful pamphlet that Joe and the Descendants Projects put together. I think when we got out on the bus, sometimes it's a little bit difficult, even with tours, to be able to contextualize the environment. And I really love, I believe it is going to be available online. Okay, yes. But I really love all the effort that they put into the pamphlet of the history and the different activities. And I took a little bit of time to be able to actually document, you know, one of the activities was like, how many of these things do you see? Parks, industry, schools, and by far, you know, any of the industries far away, any of the public services, at least that from my lens that I got to see on the tour. And again, I really do want to end with this because this is today's task in all the different group sessions that we're going to have is very much for us to be here to listen to you, your stories, your concerns, and really inform the report that we are charged with as a community. And we do have one more person for reflections from a second committee member.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. My name is Kristen Malecki. I'm actually from the north. I'm from just straight north of here in Chicago. I grew up in Wisconsin. So my perspective of the Mississippi River is from the north, and here we are down on the south. And I just want to thank Joe and Raymond for spending your day with us yesterday, guiding us through the history of your community, of your neighborhoods. We saw so much vibrancy and also on the intersection of these environmental injustices. So I was asked to give a few more reflections. I wasn't really given many instructions on what those were. But I do want to say thank you to Joe for putting this pamphlet together. I didn't realize that Joe and Joy were twins until today. I honestly looked at this. We met your sister yesterday, but her hair was down. Anyways, they run the Descendants Project, which if you're, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but if you're not, it's an amazing organization that really helps us as scientists really understand the importance of context and place in history. So I think about context and place and cumulative impacts a lot in Chicago, and there are many similarities and many differences, but the similarities are that oftentimes environmental pollution and where the industry, the heavy industry lands is in places and spaces that have been in some way marginalized. So the history of plantations of petrochemicals really illuminates that. Here in northern urban areas, it's there was a lot of redlining where communities were told they couldn't go anywhere else. So the communities didn't have many options or to live where they live. And yet communities are so incredibly strong and human lives are so incredibly important. So our work in thinking about cumulative impacts really comes to be way more than the data and the statistics and the maps. One thing that we were in Cancer Alley, which is, you all know, the river parish is called Cancer Alley. We learned yesterday it's the highest on the cumulative impacts map, which means that from not only are these communities historically legacy environmental justice communities, they're now likely the most, especially down here, vulnerable to climate change impacts that are coming. The interesting thing about environmental justice, when I think about a place like Chicago, industry's been there for over 200, 300 years. Here, it's also been here, but it seems like the growing concentration, we were just talking in the back of the room, the growing concentration of petrochemical, natural liquefied gas. What's happening now is that more and more industry is coming on an already overburdened place and space. So how do we, the charge to us as a committee is how do we take experiences that you all have and help support the science and decision-making so that we can potentially stop the increased burden on communities or make decisions that are informed by this understanding of what increased burden is, as well as understand the implications for health and well-being, broadly speaking. So one thing that, you see all these factories, we know we have rules and regulations in place to regulate things one thing at a time, right? So all of the chemistry, all of these factories could be in compliance in one way or another with state or federal laws. But what happens when you put all of those together in one place and space? Do we have the scientific tools and decision-making tools in place to adequately take that into account? And those are the questions that are in front of us as a committee, but your lived experiences and what you also see are those stressors will be really critically important to us. So those are the things the other thing that I think is also really important, I wrote some notes and I'll stop talking, but when I think about cumulative impacts and also hearing Joe's story, her family's story, so she grew up, right? She's a descendant of the plantation, right? But family and economics and environment are all so incredibly intercombined. What we do right now in environmental and occupational health sciences is we talk about occupation over here and we talk about the environment over here. But when you live and work in one place, or workers come from way someplace else to your community, suddenly our environmental and occupational components are all very much intersected. And it's really important because oftentimes it's our livelihoods, right? Everybody needs to feed their families, right? The industry is polluting the communities at the same time that it's putting food on the table. So it's also, all of that history is also really intersected. And so we learned about that yesterday. I also want to say, this is my first time to the River Parish outside of, I've been to New Orleans, but not outside. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. The area is beautiful. It was nice to be outside. So there's many different assets as well. And so we want to make sure that through this work, we're able to put together a scientific framework and decision makings and recommendations to really advance the work on the state and federal level to the best that we can. And your voices really make a difference. And we're really very grateful to have everybody here to have this discussion. Anything else? Okay.
Over right here.
Oh, sorry.
I think it may help.
Okay.
Give her a try.
Okay.
Today's
Oh, today's
Yep.
goals. Yes. Okay. Found our place. Hi. So for today's goals, the workshop, our first goal is to elevate community voices, and local knowledge. And then the second one is to help shape our committee's advice to the nation. Today's agenda is shown here in this really small print, but I think there is a handout. Is there a handout? There's no handout. It's online. But you're good. It's online, but our staff will keep on track. We will be having 2 interactive sessions to gather input from all participants. During these sessions, we will ask all our community members to participate and answer the questions. The committee will be listening and learning through and your answers. And then we will come back as a collective to share our insights and discoveries to the full group. And so the questions that we are addressing here are broken up into 2 sessions, one morning session and one afternoon session. And so for the morning session, we are focusing on stressors experienced in your community that impact your health and well-being. The questions, we will be doing a World Cafe. So we will be, you will be rotating to different tables or different rooms, sorry. The first question is, what are the main stressors experienced in your community now? The second one is, what will be the main stressors in the future in the next 10 or 20 years? You don't have to memorize any of this. During the breakout sessions, we will have the handouts and the questions. And what makes your community more vulnerable to stressors? I believe after that, there is it's lunch break. You'll come digest figuratively and literally. And then in the afternoon session, again, it's going to be focused, but more on visions for the future. And we will have a chance to highlight other aspects important for our committee to consider. And so those questions are, what are the barriers to strengthening your community's ability to respond to stressors? What is your future vision of improved community health and well-being? And what is the most important aspect for our committee to consider? And then I think before I turn it over to Kate, just a few logistics and arrangements. We really want to acknowledge how important it is to have your input. And by participating in this workshop, your perspective is going to help us understand how communities report their impact. Your input will help us review evidence and data and be mindful of the challenges faced by you and your communities. And also with your input, the report will hopefully better reflect your perspectives and needs. And great.
All right. Thank you so much, Yoshi. And I'm actually going to turn it now to Miles, and he's going to give you a few pointers on how our day is gonna work.
Sure, okay. Good morning, everybody. Just for a few of the basics here, we have the bathrooms. The men's room is just straight out and to your left, and the ladies' room is just out a little further to the left past the elevators and down another left. We also are going to be covering your parking here if you drove today and you signed in. We did need you to sign a speak release form just in case if you walk in front of the camera. Legally, we have to have you sign one, so if you didn't, please do. It could cost me my job. So, in the same vein, Anthony was having me sign those release forms, but also getting upstairs to validate your parking. So you can go down to show that to the front desk and bring it out to the valet, and they will go get your car. You will not have to go and pay for parking. It's going right to the academies. We are issuing compensation for your participation in the workshop today. We do really appreciate you guys coming out. We know it's a work day, and we know that it's a long amount of time that you're going to spend, discussing these important issues. We'll be issuing reimbursement in the form of $3 Visa gift cards. We do have a good amount of those. As you can imagine, I ran into several issues buying large quantities of $50 Visa gift cards with my credit card. So we have a good amount. I expect with the numbers that we will run out. So we will be giving one for each morning session and one for each afternoon session. And when we run out, I will ask you to give me your address and we will ship whatever additional gift card you are owed by the academies to your preferred mailing address. Finally, we have food, lunch at noon. Breakfast is right over there through those large doors. We do have a small snack and all day beverage service right over here. I do think that's everything, Kate.
Fantastic.
Okay.
So, thank you all. And I just want to say, I'm very glad that Miles is in jail right now. We're under suspicion for his some dubious practice of buying too many gift cards. So we ask for your patience with this. We'll get it all sorted. So I think now we could maybe go to the next slide. And I'm just going to walk you through the logistics of how the World Cafe is working. Now, while I'm talking, if you came in and you haven't signed your form, please feel free to rise up and go to Anthony, and he is going to get you sorted out while I'm talking, because you're going to need to get your special color. So please do that. If you don't have it, anybody in the room is missing, now is your chance. Fantastic. So how this is going to work is your color is actually your assignment to a group. It is completely random. Well, it's not. Miles had a plan. We don't know what it was. Hasn't told us. So we're going to get you in your groups. We're going to be at a little table. We're going to start with very brief introductions. When I say brief, this is what I mean. My name is Kate. I'm from the National Academy. That's it. Where I was born, whatever. Y'all can ask me that on lunch break. I'll tell you everything. Your table, your room is going to be hosted by one or two committee members. And this committee member is going to ask you the questions that Yoshi showed you on the screen. And we're going to go around, you're going to answer the question. Now, you have several ways you may answer the question. Number one, you speak. When I say, okay, Kate, answer the question, and I say, well, what I think is blah, blah. In the middle of your table is going to be this white board, and there's a pen. And you can write on the board. We also have sticky pads. So after you've spoken or before you've spoken, you want to jot something down for the committee members to take into account. All of these tools are here. We have big notepads. We have pens. We have all of it. So all of this is open. It's really a casual discussion. It's small group, you're all going to have time. It is participatory. We are going to ask you to speak. So we were very grateful for all of you for this. After 20 minutes, we will play a chime. Miles will tell us. Also, your staff member, there will be one staff member in each group. If you're with me, I'm really sorry about it. But luckily Miles will be nearby and we will not mess up. And at 20 minutes, you are going to rise with your staff member and we will take you to the next table. The next table has next question. Now, not everybody is going to go 1, 2, 3. Some people are going to go 3 and then 1 and 2. Some people are going to go 2, 3, 1. Doesn't matter. We will take you and then you're going to sit down at the next table and you're going to go through the same thing again. By the second time, you're going to have it down and the third time will be super easy. Does anybody have any questions? All right. On the next slide is the secret decoder ring. So you can look at your name tag and we at this moment are going to break you into groups. And we're going to start with the very bottom, the blue group. Now, blue is actually a little hard to tell from purple. But if you're blue, you're going to go with Yoshi. And Yoshi's staff member is Anthony. And if you have a blue sticker, dark blue sticker, can you show the color from your?
Dark blue.
Dark blue. If you're dark blue, we're going to ask you to rise and follow. All right. Anthony, okay. That was the dark blue group. We only have 5 to go.
Everyone just run in this room before we leave, just to see if in case our numbers did not get.
I think we just go.
We just go.
Yeah, because I think we should just go. We'll have a tour later. You can stay behind.
Yeah.
Okay. Next group is the green group. Green group. Green group. John, Ben,
And Chris.
Chris, and Andy.
The green button, you're with us.
Green button. You're with Chris. John, Ben. All right. Looks like Jane. All right. Then Raymond. The green one. All right. All right. Are we figuring it out? Next one is red.
Please follow Rima right in the center of the phone. Thank you very much.
All right. John, Ben. Go ahead. Keep going.
Okay.
You want me to go together? Not yet. We'll be last. Okay. Do we have any yellow people? Yellow stickers.
Light
Green,
blue.
light.
We're not,
My room is with us,
we're gonna go to another room then.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Light blue over here.
Light blue.
Actually, let's go to the back. You know what?
Yes, I-
We're gonna take you to the next room, actually.
Do you want me to grab this for you, Gal? I'll grab it.
We have one of those in the other room.
Yep.
Purple stays here.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm living- I'm gonna get out of the door. I wasn't my side, go ahead. Give it up. Just give it up.
Let's just go. Yeah. Green.
That is always a question.
Question to make sure I ask it the right way. Hey, Miles. Miles, I'm gonna sign out of Zoom here because I don't see Jared on the show. Okay, great.
We have you guys on camera and we have the
Okay,
audio here,
great.
so it should be no problem.
It's because it's fizzing, that's all.
Missing.
Yes, I'm trying to like get over some bronchitis.
Sorry, I thought it was milk.
No, it's not. It looks like it though.
What's happening over here?
No, no, no.
The Danka cows, huh?
No.
Welcome, everybody, to the Purple Grove. It's great to see you. So I thought we could start by just going around the table and doing those brief introductions that Kate was encouraging us to do. So I'll just start. My name is Rachel Moreira-Lafroche. I'm on the Academy Center.
Good morning, Jessica Dandridge Smith. I'm Executive Director of the Water Collaborative in New Orleans, based here in Southeast Louisiana.
Cordell Banner with the Descendants Project. David Slusky with University of Kansas, sit on the Academy panel.
Barbara Washington with Inclusive Louisiana, St. James Parish.
I'm Kim Terrell from Tulane Environmental Law Clinic, and I'm really excited to meet you all over my reference library. I didn't know you would be here.
Well, great. We can chat more during lunch.
I'm gonna read the question or? how do you-
Yeah, so, what we're gonna do is our question for the next few minutes is, what are the main stressors experienced in your community now? And it'd be great if people can talk. I'm gonna be taking notes. David's gonna be helping me facilitate. And then if you also wanna write stuff on this panel here, grab the pen. There's also stickies if you wanna write. I'm gonna try and capture everything. If you have additional thoughts that you weren't able to say, just write it on a sticky and leave it with me and I will try to get the notes and report out, okay?
I'm not sure what the scissors are for, but if somebody has a creative idea, let me know.
Yes, I'm not sure why we have scissors, but, yeah. So, again, the question is, what are the main stressors experienced in your, community now? So, who wants to start? I
Yeah,
can
where to
tell
I'm gonna
this is
say it's
not-
a lot of stressors.
I know, this is not
Yeah.
a quiet group. And also we're being, session is, yes, online.
I'll go.
Sure.
I think.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So. Again, that's a long list of stressors, but as some of you saw yesterday, we live in a bit of a remote area along the River Road. And so a lot of things that are common in community, we don't have. We don't have a supermarket. We don't have a gas station. We don't have a clinic. We don't have all the things that you would normally have in a community. All we have houses of people, which are great. We love them, but we'd also like to be able to buy a Coke somewhere. That we don't have to cross the bridge and go to a different community, go spend our money in someone else's community, when we should spend it in ours.
to add to the stresses what Burdell's talking about, I live in a community very similar to where he is. And he's saying that, you know, we like to buy some things that we should have in our community. We have to go outside of a community. From the Sunshine Bridge to the Veterans Memorial Bridge where I live, there is no real superstore where I could buy a decent pair of shoes.
We don't get to run away. We know where the chairs are, but you have to stay with us.
He mentioned the gas station. There's no gas station. We lost a senior citizen building right into our community. And then there's a bank that has gone from our community. All those things we don't have in our community. So those are some stresses.
That's a clarified question.
Yeah.
Speaking about the river parishes, Louisiana, like how big or the scope is?
The
for that?
scope is as big as you want it or as small as you want it to be.
I think on a much more macro policy scope, so I'm thinking about economic stressors. The state of Louisiana has really divested in economic opportunities.
No, that's it.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. I forgot to say I live here in New Orleans, sorry.
Most residents and citizens of this state. The other thing I think is a historical divestment. Mathematical skills have decreased. I think that is an ongoing systemic issue. And then I also think healthcare is another one where similar, just like everything else, historical divestment, and people are unhealthier here, right? And the irony is that I think the fastest growing economic group or sector is healthcare because everybody is sick.
Right.
Everybody has cancer. I have bronchitis. I never had bronchitis. I'm pretty sure it's an environmental factor. So constantly dealing with ongoing health challenges, but not also having that investment back in communities. We're talking about food deserts. It's a statewide issue, although we're talking about Cancer Alley specifically. But I've worked all across the state. I've seen it down in Clackamas Parish. I've seen it all the way up in Alexandria. It's an ongoing problem that is persistent.
And I guess I'll say the thing that we're all taking for granted, which is the air pollution, which affects, you know, a lot of neighborhoods in the river parishes and in New Orleans, and doesn't affect everybody equally, of course. And both with respect to air toxics, which don't have adequate state standards, and with respect to federally, you know, regulated criteria pollutants, neither of which are adequately monitored in our state. And even when there is monitoring, our state agency finds ways to disregard that data.
Yeah, just kind of going back to the industry note, that a stressor that we have because we live so close to the industry is that we see and smell and hear things happening, but we rarely know what's going on. And sometimes we're informed after the fact, but most of the time we don't. And it's either someone tells us what the fact is, or someone along the line makes up fact. And so the information that we get can sometimes be absolute nothing, or even word, whatever, nothing, or just completely inaccurate. And so there is a worry that comes along with that, you know, who's gonna release something on me next, or who's going to blow up next? Who's gonna have a large fire next? I was on my way to my parents' house across the bridge that we were on yesterday, and Garyville Refinery was on fire. A huge fire. And I get across to my parents and they, oh yeah, we did see the black smoke, what's going on? The refineries across the river is on fire.
But it didn't leave the property line, right?
So
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
it's a,
To ask
the
about
air
that,
state
Yeah, the
contains.
air stayed contained.
is the primary consequence of that residents can't take precautions and preventive measures they would take? Or is it the emotional stress of not knowing and being
It's
exposed?
both.
I think it's
Yeah,
both.
good question, but it's both.
And the other thing is that if you call the LDEQ, you don't get a response
What is
from
it? What is
them.
it?
The Louisiana Department of Environment and
Got it.
Quality. Yes. I have called, I've smelled something like early in the morning and I used the hotline. Nobody never got back to me to even question what I was smelling or what was going on. So you never get anything back, and other people have called and they never got a response back. And then our local officials, sometimes you call them and they say, oh, it was confined, nothing happened, nobody got hurt or anything like that. So that's all the things that we all often hear.
Later, one of Barbara's council members, St. James Parish, when that marathon fire happened at a subsequent council meeting, said that he saw the smoke from the refinery go up in the air and pass over everybody's homes. So what's the big deal?
Right.
Like, this is the approach to environmental monitoring and enforcement at the local level.
I think it goes back to the lack of education and understanding. And also, obviously, this idea that what I've always heard in Louisiana is that if we are critiquing oil and gas and petrochemicals, we're gonna lose jobs, we're gonna
Right.
have economic degradation,
Right.
we're not gonna have any investment, but we already don't have those things. So I could go on about that. I think the other thing too I want to add is obviously climate change and its impacts on all industries, especially the petrochemical industry lining the river parishes. We're seeing releases of toxins, we're seeing failures of systems that are not being addressed on a regular basis, but especially coupling that with a hurricane or a natural disaster. We're also coming from the water space and the environmental space, increasing tropical storms, strengthening tropical events, drought, flood, tornadoes. I'm 35. My parents are like, I've never seen all three of these things at the same time. But now our region is facing all of them simultaneously. Where the Mississippi River is running out of water, all the river parishes, I think except for one, I think it might be Ascension Parish, drinks from the Mississippi River. So we're not only drinking pollutants coming down the river, massive amounts of PFAS and forever chemicals that exceed EPA regulation, plastics and microplastics in our water that are not being filtered out because these same river parish utilities don't have the money to invest in new technologies. But we're also not seeing drought. We've never seen that before, where now communities along the Mississippi River are running out of clean drinking water. And many of these parishes don't have aquifers to tap into. And then the last thing I'll add is the collapsing insurance market, which is all of the things that I mentioned above is causing that collapse. And people just can't afford to stay in their homes or rebuild their homes after the storm.
So insurance, you mean
Homeowners,
homeowners, property casualty, health,
oh,
disability,
yeah,
life?
mainly homeowners and flood is what's impacting homeowners. But I would say all insurance systems have failed Louisianians for a long time.
That's so true. Right after Hurricane Katrina, after they built up everything there, people in the La Place area started flooding. And now they built up in La Place and people in the Gramercy Letcher area are flooding. We kind of like below sea level, but water is coming to us. They're building something else. So where all the water is gonna go? So that's another thing that we're looking at. We never flood, but we've seen a lot of water coming our way.
So I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. So are you saying that, for example, flood mitigation efforts in one community or construction activities in one community?
It's
Affects.
exactly, that's what it's doing.
Like whack-a-mole.
Right.
Because they're not dealing with the root cause. which
Right.
is-
And then we have our government, our local officials don't believe in climate change and global warming.
So maybe a, a different note, but I think a stressor that I'm seeing and where I grew up was that, and I also, the kids leave there. So the
Yes.
communities are
Yeah.
dying.
That's very true.
Losing population. And so if everyone leaves, then there's no one there to preserve it, right? No one there to enjoy it.
Right.
So, so to me, that's a worry that, what's the future gonna
Right.
be for Welcome and for Wallace and for all these smaller communities? If I move to Gonzales and you move to Baton Rouge,
Right.
and you move to New Orleans,
Right.
and then there's no one left.
That's true. That's a great stress. Because we have family land, 34 acres of land, in our family, and that we still trying to hold on to. Which we know that, industry wants that. Nucor is right there. Occidental is, on the east of us. And there are so many different others that are trying to come in. And so it's like, I've seen so many of my loved ones, friends and cousins and relatives. The street I stay on, the second house on the street that I stay on, husband and wife died from cancer 1 month apart. You go down my street, my uncle has prostate cancer right now. My neighbor last year died with throat cancer. His wife is a survivor of breast cancer. Across the street, another person, lung cancer. So it's just all over. We have a plant that's a steel plant, but it has been emitting sulfuric acid, mist, and hydrogen sulfide. And we know that according to Tulane clinic, that the chemicals that being exposed, they are affecting us. I have a nephew that's in the hospital right now with liver cancer. And so we know that some of the things that is emitted into the air is happening, and the doctor have told him that it's an environmental effect. Yes.
I'll add to that too, that as a young person, the last 10 years, I've lost 9 elders. I don't have any elders left except for my grandmother, and they all died of
Died of
cancer.
cancer.
Every single one of them died of cancer. And my family never had a history of cancer running in the family. So it wasn't like this is something that goes back 2 or 3, 4 generations.
Right.
This is an elder generation that all died of various different kinds of cancers. T-cell lymphoma, breast cancer, kidney cancer, all lymph nodes.
Right.
And so now as a young person, I don't even have kids, but my kids will never know an elder because they've already died.
Right.
And so there's both sides of that strain where you're losing people.
Mhm.
And then the young people who are still here, like myself, we don't have any elders to look to teach and to create community.
And sometimes they say, a lot in the family have died from cancer. They say it's hereditary. But one lady just came to me a week ago and she said she went and got tested. She's in the family. Her family has cancer, but it's not genetic. She has cancer, but it's not genetic. She did go get tested for the
Markers.
yeah,
Yeah.
and she has all of them in her body.
Sorry, she got tested for, because I think I know who you're talking
Yeah,
about.
she
She
got-
got tested for exposure to pollutants. right?
Yeah.
Right. Yes, she got tested for exposure.
Yeah.
Those, as a matter of fact, we had a pamphlet that Tulane put out for us that had all of the chemicals that are in the air, and she hadn't got tested for those, and she have at least 5 of them in her body.
I have a question. I don't mean to be insensitive. I just want to understand the whole picture. So we talked a little about this yesterday. All of this industrial activity, are individuals in the community also working in these plants?
Some of them are.
And would,
And they're making a living, so,
Yeah.
so it's kind of hard for them to see that
sure, of course.
we make a living, we are paying my bills and, and you telling me that, I don't have, what am I gonna do? That's what they're saying.
Right.
What else am I gonna do? because I have a good job and it's a good paying job, but yet and still, I may be getting sick, and they see the job to them outweigh their health.
I'll also add that I think, like, just looking at the numbers, Louisiana still is not getting its share of those jobs. Like, especially the high level jobs, they go to Houston, they go to New York, they go to New Jersey, they go to Delaware. Like, for the amount of industry that Louisiana has, New Orleans and Baton Rouge should have way more high-level executive positions in the petrochemical industry, and all of those positions are going out of state, and all of that money is going out of state. And so, you know, people do rely on those jobs locally, but they should be better jobs than they are.
I would even say it in a smaller scale that the people in my community may say that they go work at one of these industries, and they may think that they have a good job, but at best, they are lower mid-level jobs that they're taking.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All of the top middle management or senior leaders, and I know because I worked at one of them, right? They don't reflect the people of color for sure.
Right.
And then on top of that, so they don't equally don't reflect the people who live around that, right? So
Right.
even if we gave in to say, well, you know, it's here, but at least we benefit. I send my kids to college and I can afford to buy them a house somewhere or years of paying. I'll do anything for my kids.
Mhm.
We don't really even get that opportunity so much, right? It's we can pay the bills and have a decent car and keep this whole thing kind of going. But as far as, you know, growing and preparing the next generation is not really, could be a lot better, kind of the same idea, but at a more local scale.
Can I ask a follow-up question about the departure of youth? And so are people seeing, for example, young people are leaving the community, which is then another way in which existing community members are losing their land? Or, yeah,
So I'll say that
and wealth, I guess I would say, you know, your home, your
Right.
property.
in some case, I know of a case right now where the family that owned land and the siblings moved off, and one sibling that lived in Chicago was responsible for paying the property tax.
Mhm.
Somewhere along the way, they forgot about it. Which after 3 years or after maybe 1 year, it actually was a tax.
Mhm.
So it was sold for pennies on the dollar. Someone paid the taxes. And now they legally own and have a deed to that land. They lost their land.
Mhm.
So kind of as a product of people moving away. And I at least know of two cases. One was like 7 acres on Highway 70. Huge piece of land where the guy lives in California. Oh yeah, forgot about that. Well, here's your letter of you don't own it anymore.
Right.
Okay.
We have a lot of blighted homes area where I am. And so like you're saying, the people who own the land may not live in the area, but then there are some people who live in the area and it's estate property. So nobody, you know, does anything with that. So it's like the council has ordinances now that, you know, if you don't cut your grass, if they got blighted houses, they come in and they tear the house down. And so naturally they lose their land in a sense like that. So we have a lot of that going on as well.
Yeah, and I will say that a lot of young people that I know who moved out of the river parishes, including my own family, they left because of the environmental factors, right? And obviously opportunities. And when my family talks about losing land, they had that in Donaldsonville. They don't care. They're like, what's that land worth anyway? That's how they think about it. It's
That's
like,
true.
it's not worth anything. It's not like it's land in California. It's in their mind, right? And even though it's family value, it's wealth building.
Right.
But to them, that land is degrading in value as well as in quality. So a lot of my family, I tried to argue with my own grandmother, like, hey, we should fight for this. She doesn't want to. And not on, you know, on top of other emotional, like it's a lot of trauma, and like, I'm just gonna leave it where it is.
Mhm.
Well, the land that I'm talking about where my family is, has been there for 150 years. My great grandmother purchased it in 1874. It's only 34 acres of land, but it's land that she purchased, and we want to keep it in our family. A lot of it is grassy, and we have a lot of debris on it, and that's what we are trying to do, is to clean it up and make the community look like a community. That's another problem we have, because we have some trailers on the property, and the people whose trailers are on the property doesn't live there. And so they live at, they have homeowners, insurance, and they can't, have, grass too high there. All that's being enforced. So they don't live like that in the area where they are, but it doesn't matter to them that, you live across, that you have a home across the street from me, and I'm trying to protect mine.
And I think that's something that we see too, and I don't wanna separate, it's happening in New Orleans as well, right? I think that is a myth that if people outside New Orleans think that New Orleans is cold, it's not. The city is also shrinking, and people are moving to bigger cities, they're just moving to Houston, Atlanta, parts of Florida. And properties are being bought up by private investors. They're being bought up by Airbnbs, they're being bought up by, like you said, people with their third, fourth home who want a vacation home just for Mardi Gras. And then they don't come in for, 10 months out of the year. So it's happening statewide. People, again, feeling that squeeze of environmental factors, economic, healthcare, education, and they're choosing not to stay. Every single one of my friends have left, and the two that one is working in Zachary, Louisiana. He's preparing to go to San Francisco next year. I'll be the only one left of my own friends in their 30s that is planning on staying. Everybody else going.
I have 4 daughters, and none of them live in the area where I am. One is in Texas, one is in La Paz, one is in Baton Rouge, and one is in Sorrento. And neither one of them want the house the family house. None of them saying they're coming back, And so, like you're saying, this is a stressor.
I think Jessica kind of alluded to it earlier, but I feel like we should capture the salt ledge. But
Right.
that's a whole new
It's a new thing.
stressor. So, like the drought that's happening is causing the water from the Gulf of Mexico to come up into the Mississippi River, the saline water. And like it happens during the summertime. I think it first happened 2 or 3 years ago. And so parishes close to the Gulf don't have drinking water because the water is too saline. And it's not as simple as going and getting bottled water, because like your whole house's systems are not meant to run on salt water, right? Like your washing machines, your everything, your plumbing. So just for me in New Orleans, like, I'm like, okay, I'm fine with hurricanes. I'm fine with potholes and subsidence and having to spend $1,000 on repairing my car because I drove down the street and hit a pothole. But now I might not have any water to do anything in my house. So yeah, the salt ledge stresses me out. I don't know.
And it's not going away, right?
Yeah.
Drought, it's a nationwide drought.
Right.
But that if there's no water, if there's no snow coming down from the north, which I'm hearing people, my friends in New York saying there's no snow and it's almost December. Then if there's no snow, then there's not enough water to keep the Mississippi River flowing. And the Gulf of Mexico with sea level rise is powerful enough to push the Mississippi River backwards. And suddenly all of the communities along the Mississippi River, the lower Mississippi River Valley are now threatened. The other thing that's really interesting that's happening is because there's no water usage laws in Louisiana, the same petrochemical industries are still allowed to use water at massive amounts at no cost, zero cost, than taking water away from communities that need it the most. So the few communities that do have aquifers, There are not that many in Southeast Louisiana, mostly central and north, but the few that do, they have to compete with their water systems with the private industries. Particularly in Plaquemines Parish, the LNG plant using tons of water. And again, at zero cost. Meanwhile, I work with a Grand Bayou Village, which is less than about a mile or so from that plant, and they have bottled water stacked up to the ceiling because they can't drink water.
Mhm.
I think
And they're paying twice for water, I'm assuming, right? They're paying
Oh, yeah.
a water bill for water that is not usable, and then now they're having
Now
to
they
pay
pay the
for
bottled water.
bottled water. Yeah.
Miles has told me we are at time.
Folks, unfortunately, we do have to move on to the next
Yeah.
question. If we could carry you off to the next meeting room, that would be fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really incredibly informative. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
shot. Right now, of course, you know that we're labeled as Cancer Alley, which I don't like that term. I am a economic, social and culture. And the most important one I think we overlook is the psychological stresses that we deal with. Most of our kids are getting diagnosed at such an early age. The school in my community is actually less than 2 miles from CF Industry. Almost all those kids have a diagnosis there with ADD, ADHD. And when you go to other schools and hear them label your kids as Donaldsonville, the bad kids, well, no, they're not bad kids. They have a chemical imbalance. They're less than 2 miles from the plant. They live so close to the railroad track where the trains run constantly going in and out the industry. That's not even heard, I haven't heard in a while. The barge is blowing from behind the levee. So I'm putting myself in a position of an 8-year-old kid that don't get to sleep at night because they hear the train, they hear the barges. That plant has a roaring noise that you hear constantly. And to take those poor babies and start labeling them and say those kids have issues when they haven't came to their conscious sense to say, we never should have built this school, you know, that close to the plant. And now we have CF Industry in my community playing Santa Claus, showing up with T-shirts at every event, or giving ice out for a whole hurricane that's caused by climate change that they're enabling. There is no one monitoring that plant in my community. We finally just got a monitor put in place in St. James, and one will be in what they call the historic district of Donaldsonville. That is the part of my town that will be preserved for the community members that live in it. But they're surrounding us, like there's 33 plants in Ascension Parish currently, and we have over a dozen more online to be permitted to come into a small community. So my stressor, besides the health problem, the psychological problem, is the leadership that we have in place. We don't have any protection. Nobody's hearing us. And then whatever check they're getting paid under the table to bring in more industries. I don't know where we stand and how do we fight those bigger giants like that.
So this is something that,
Tell me your name.
oh, so sorry, Courtney Harris, and I'm with Louisiana as well. So, my statement will not be as intricate and covers as many
Okay.
things as Ashley's does, because I am new with the group. But one thing that I noticed, and this may not be as important of an issue as some of those other stressors, but development in our community. We grew up in the same community, but I moved away. And one thing I noticed coming home, there is no development in our area. And I think that that's because of the chemical industry. No one wants to move there. There aren't any companies that want to come and set up shop there. And so we are left to travel long distances, 30 minutes, an hour, to you know, be able to access the conveniences that most people can walk up the corner and obtain. So I think that that is a major stressor.
I'm David. I'm a professor at the University of Kansas and a member of the National Academies Committee. Please.
Cindy Robertson, Micah 6-8 Mission, Sulphur, Louisiana, Southwest Louisiana, basically. What are the main stressors experienced in your community now? I think that what I would like to highlight is the effect that years of toxic pollution in our area and that impact on our mental, physical health. Specifically the community that I work with in Sulphur, which is called Poche Town, and we're on the wrong side of the tracks. Everybody, if you identify yourself from Poche Town, you're looked down on because it's low income, unhoused addicts. And I was just thinking about what you were saying about the lack of, I mean, you know, we don't have a Starbucks. And I was trying to think, where are the low income areas in Lake Charles, which is the big city? They have the African American population in North Lake Charles, but all the low income white folks are on the west side of the river in Sulphur and Vinton. And so, you know, I mean, it's indicative we have no Starbucks. You know, everybody has, I take that back. There's a Starbucks in the Kroger where all the upper middle class folks go to shop. And so in Poche Town, there's a huge, they're poorly educated. There are huge mental health issues. There are developmental issues. And until just recently, there was like 600 times the recommended limit of manganese in our water. And if you know anything about manganese, it has a big impact on neurological development. And so the reason we have such mental health problems and we're low income and poorly educated is that we've been drinking the water, y'all. You know, there are people that have grown up in that, and I brought that to the attention of the city, which is one of the reasons why I am not liked. And eventually they got funding to put green sand filters in the North Verdine water plant, which is where I get my water from, where Poche Town gets its water from. And the water is so bad that there are times when you fill a bathtub full and put your child in it and you can't see their legs because it's brown. But it's drinkable. It goes through all the health department, you know, but those health department regulations haven't been updated in 20 to 40 years.
And I'll say this, I've also worked in water. That LDH do not come out and test the water as often in certain areas.
Yeah.
We made water for Ascension in Assumption Parish. For some reason in Assumption Parish, because of Pierpont, those people, white people with money would fuss and cry. We would get dinged all the time for the water. Yet in Donaldsonville, we barely get it. And you never know when you're gonna get an inspection. You might want to get one this year. You might not get one this year. So it's depending on the part of your town that even LDH takes serious enough to even care about the water you drink.
Yeah, there are places on our streets where they have, when the water gets really brown and people really start to complain a lot, they come through and they flush the systems, they open the fire. So we have streets that are stained orange. So you know that when you have iron and bacteria collect on it, and so that means that the disinfectant chemicals get put in higher. And so the disinfectant byproducts are way high, but that's not regulated.
And you get the corrosive problems in Flint.
And the corrosive part. And so we've done water testing just recently because the sulfur salt dome, some of the caverns they declared an emergency. They're collapsing. And so they're pushing loads and loads, like thousands of gallons a minute into the salt domes. And it's got to be going somewhere. So we tested the Houston River Water Works water system, which is closest to the salt dome, and the sulfur water system. And lo and behold, in the Houston River water system, there was diesel organic material. Now, when I said I wanted to test for hydrocarbons in the water, they said, oh, you don't do that with drinking water. It's like, I don't care. I want to know because the salt domes used to be petroleum, part of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So now we have people who are being water that they think is safe, and according to LDH is safe, has not just diesel organic material, but there were two other things. Dr. Subra has got on a Zoom with us and told us, basically, she said, don't drink the water, don't cook with the water, don't shower with the water, don't bathe with the water. Okay, because it's the steam, the vapor, you know, so it's like, no, I can't afford to. And if I go to try to get, the only thing that would take it out, if I try to put a reverse osmosis system in everybody's house, the cheapest one is $139, and we have in Sulphur, in my little area, we have like 2,000 homes. So how am I going to do that? Where am I going to get funding to do that? Why does the Louisiana Department of Health not, and EPA, because they use the EPA requirements, why do they not update the requirements? Because it's going to cost the cities too much money. They use a cost benefits ratio. And it's like, yo, this is my life. This is not something you should be cost benefit ratioing. Anyway, I'll get off my, but that's, you know, we have mental health problems because of the pollution that is there.
It's also cost money to deal with.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
My name is, oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead. But
No.
the city doesn't have to pay for that. That comes from the federal government, all the mental health money.
My name is Barbara Major. I'm an anti-racist community organizer. I work with lots of different groups. One of the stresses as I'm sitting here talking is knowing both what's wrong, knowing how it can be corrected, and knowing those in position to correct it won't. I in my community, I was just at a meeting, and the biggest stressor was the lack of a sense of safety. And that's in every way, whether it's here, it's gun violence, I'm in New Orleans, but it's also housing security, food security, it's your physical, mental security. So it's just this lack of a sense of safety. And in reality, being Black, that has existed as long as I can remember, generationally. However, it's been heightened now, given the political environment that we are living in. So this lack of a sense of safety that I know my community is feeling is a big stressor. And that's and not that it hasn't existed, but it's been exacerbated by the political rhetoric or the, you know, political environment. Because I live in a blue city in a red state. So we're real clear, it's the same thing that they will be coming for us. I mean, we know this. And not another stress is not exactly knowing how to prepare, 'cause you know, be coming at you from everywhere. However, I would be remiss if I said, even though these stresses are there, when I sit at a table with folk like you, we will be pushing back. Whomever we are, whatever community may not like us, but evil never does. You know what I'm saying? Evil never like truth. It just don't. So, and the young people are out here doing this make me feel a whole lot better. I know you're getting your butts kicked, but there were folks whose shoulders you stand on got their butts kicked too. So y'all gonna be all right.
That's what I try to live off of. Like everybody's crying over the 4 years.
Yeah.
I'm like, we made it through 400 years.
That's what I'm
Don't think
saying.
these 4 years gonna cripple me. And I do push back, like with the historical, you still, like, it's on my mind with you saying that the historical erasers in place that's being put in place.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't fight and if you don't talk because they don't like you, you fall into the game where they want you to be at. After the election, I went live on Facebook and I really dealt with some problems in my community because like you said, they actually make you fight against one another.
Yeah,
to keep-
absolutely.
To draw your attention off of the real problem. And I address that in my life, just saying, you know, you have to stop falling for the hate games and the fight that they want you to fight. And let's pay attention to the fight at hand that we have. And right now in town, we're definitely getting swamped by the industries. I on the planning and zoning committee, and when I got on that committee, it was heartbreaking the way they would post about the rezone your area, lot 7342. I'm like, who knows
Wouldn't know
where
that.
that is?
Right.
So for me being an employee and I'm typing, and I'm like, I'm about to change the way I post this because nobody know who it is. They recognize that because even the attorney pulled me to the side. He said, "You didn't post this in the paper." I said, "I did." He was like, "I didn't see the lot number." I said, "It's at the bottom," but I actually put the address and the community as we know it in parentheses, what we labeled as back of town or whatever. And he was like, "That's way too much information." I'm like, that's why nobody show up at a meeting to fight, because
That's
they don't
right.
know what
They
they're
don't
looking
know.
for.
Exactly.
So needless to say, I'm not on that job anymore.
But that's obfuscation is right there.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah, so you just
absolutely.
always feeling, the stress is always having a fight.
Yeah. It's like one of the things we always say, what do you like about being black? We're resilient. I'm damn tired of having to be resilient. Yes. Like, give me a break. Can I just have a
Like this
break?
new term they got, people want to live in a soft era, and I'm like, what the hell is a soft era?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like they want to just live,
Just
like be free.
Vicariously.
And things happen without them having to fight. I'm like, that doesn't exist. And if you're sitting on your tail waiting for your soft arrow, you're gonna put us further behind.
Yeah.
Not for me.
One of the things too, when I hear you and I hear you all, what I also hear are the missed opportunities to build what I would say was a multiracial movement around environmental justice. One is because funding don't happen for that. It's, but okay, full disclosure, I'm really angry at funders in this country for funding services, but never funding organizing to build a movement to push back. That, a good friend of mine, one of my mentors, Barbara, they sick dogs on us. We kept coming.
Yes.
He said they put water hoses on it. We kept coming. They gave us a grant and a 501c3. We stopped coming. Think about it. Set up. Because and the fact that you all
Gotta go through somebody else for that.
oh yeah, the intermediaries and all that. Oh yeah, they got words for all that. It's but I see the potential though. Because you shouldn't be by yourself and y'all shouldn't be by yourself.
That's a stressor too, because the divination, like, okay, like I'm neighboring to, and I'm gonna say this, I'm a neighboring city to St. James. We can't work together for nothing. Everything is divided. What got me into doing this, my dad started an organization back in 2008, was called the Help Organization, when it was trying to run a pipeline right behind the church that he pastored, and the church is like 125 years old. So he's trying to keep that church in the community.
Yeah.
So my dad has an A-grade education, but when I tell you, when he got so passionate about that and started fighting, here I am on a government job where I thought this is my retirement in place. I can't mess with him because I'm gonna lose my job, because you can't say certain things when you're on this political job. When I left off that job and my dad started that, I saw organizations came behind the help organization, like Rise St. James and Inclusive and all those things. But to tie these groups together to work together was heartbreaking for me. I'm hearing stuff like, y'all copying, or I started this. That is heartbreaking for me, because here you go playing the same
You know what?
game.
But you gotta know, as an organizer, that's internalization of racial oppression. When we get opposed to each other. But when people don't understand how they've been socialized to see that,
Stressor to me.
that's the organizing in terms of educating people how we have been set up and played, and not just black folk, because my white siblings been played too. Exactly. So creating strategies to educate those of us that do the work, so that we can educate those of us that's being impacted.
That's right.
That I don't see that anywhere. Maybe it exists. I don't see it. I don't see everything.
As actually don't see what we see, like believing the Republicans saying climate change isn't real.
Yeah.
How do you get a community to say, put your guns down, put your hands down, stop fighting against one another, sister to sister, let's have a talk? As a strategic approach that they're taking. So why are we not taking a strategic
It's
approach?
happened before. It's happened before. And you as a young organizer need to understand that it's happened before. That there's an intentionality that it doesn't happen again. But you have to be educated as an organizer in terms of how you're not gonna reach everybody, but how you reach people in your community, how you reach and how you bring them together. It's a process, ain't no quick fix to it, but it can happen. Just like you saw and learned, and you, the potential for other people in the community is there. but it is also how we approach them.
You have
See,
to.
yeah, because you can't come at me talking about, I don't understand why y'all don't understand. I gotta help them, I gotta process them, and they gotta come to the conclusion, maybe they don't understand. And they gotta be, so we don't take their face while we're trying to move them forward. Yeah, yes. Part.
Bigger.
But y'all doing it. I mean, I stumbled and fell so many times.
Like that's
Yes, it's gotta be.
that's the major stressor because I'm in Cameron, I'm in Washington, I try to show myself friendly in any community.
Yes.
You can't come people community and take
Without
over.
it, yes,
But
right.
the divination that's coming between organizers are really, that's stressful.
Yes,
because
it is.
you can't be divided as an organizer when you're fighting for the same goal. So it makes me question, are we on this for the same goal? Like say the 501c3 thing came about, everybody wants a 501c3. But are they tempting you with a few dollars to actually stay divided?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, guys.
It's time to go.
Thank you so
Getting
much.
thrown out again. Okay. Oh, yes. Not on
Very nice
speaker.
to meet you all. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank y'all for being here and listening.
Of course, thank you so much.
Let's see.
Give me more than that, Jerry. Right.
Yes.
Right.
It's so difficult to interrupt.
And that was.
Yeah, what happens now? So now,
Yeah, one more group,
same question.
same question.
Great, okay.
Oh, welcome.
Yeah. It's boiling.
No, it's your seat.
Excellent.
the chair, or right there.
Please.
Good to see you later.
Always.
We're gonna try to do just introductions first. It's hard because everyone wants to jump into the questions. Do introductions before we read the question, so we can try to make it all the way around and then get. So I'm David. I'm a professor at the University of Kansas, also a member of the committee.
Scott Eustace, Community Science Director, Healthy Golf working in Southeast Louisiana, mostly wetlands.
Jane Patton with the Center for International Environmental Law, working on chem, agrichem, carbon capture, live here in New Orleans from Baton Rouge.
I'm Rachel Moreno Frosh. I'm teaching at UC Berkeley School of Public Health. And I'm on the
I'm Dee Dee Green here in New Orleans with Holly Grove Neighbors Association and Piece by Piece New Orleans.
Joe Johnson with Louisiana Bucket Brigade, here from New Orleans.
And I'm Dr. Angela Chalk, founder and executive director with Healthy Community Services and visiting adjunct professor at the Tulane University Celia Scott Weatherhead School of Public Health. Yeah, it's new, it's a new name, yes.
I'm Candace Carter, representing Together Gartown Neighborhood Association, which is a historically Black community down in Major Quarter in New Orleans.
Okay, so similar strategies you had in that last meeting, if you have thoughts, people have been needing stickies here. And we're just gonna pose the question and have people jump in, and I'm gonna be taking notes, David's gonna be helping me facilitate, because it's hard to write. At the same time. So the question that we want to hear from you about is, what are the main stressors experienced in your community now?
And this one is live streamed, just so you.
Yeah, we're live stream right now. So it's not just us that's hearing, anyone's online.
So as we were discussing in the previous breakout sessions, it's the political determinants of health that are impacting the social determinants of health of Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. And so in this political climate, and we see that the way it's setting up, how do we continue to strive at achieving equity in those neighborhoods that are disinvested, underrepresented, in order to not only look at the economic impacts, but the social impacts of those communities, and so that they can be thriving communities, whether it's the urban heat island effect, the wetlands with the oil and gas industries, everyday urban flooding effects that affects those community gardens that provide access to healthy food choices to folks, and then understanding as a whole how communities operate, the social and cultural norms of that community and what their needs are.
And go ahead. And I'll just say it again, it's really the lack of remediation for when things happen, which means there's a lack of planning and also a response for when things happen, especially in communities that have a low socioeconomic status.
And taking into effect, when we were just finishing up our last session, the repetitive traumas that folks have and what those cumulative impacts have on folks in those communities that are affected the first and worst and less to recover. And we know that COVID showed us the disparities among Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities versus more affluent communities that have greater political clout.
The question.
Oh, yeah. What are the main stressors experienced in your community now?
Okay, so Candace, Raymond, and I were on a call yesterday, and we were talking about blight and dumping, and how our neighborhoods are always responsible for cleanups and all that kind of stuff, only to see the same level of debris and litter a couple of days later. And so we have, I know in Congo, we have a few residents who are very determined to keep their areas clean. One lives near a school and she's like, we just cannot have our children walking past this going to school. But also, I don't know that the city does anything to determine the effects of like big refrigerators sitting in, dumped, or if there is any environmental impact to having certain materials just sit in along a property that is not maintained by the city or the owner. So blight and dumping are huge issues in the city. I'm just thinking about conversations I've had with other people who often and efforts I've been a part of where we collected thousands of pounds of debris, or community-based organizations are paying to have debris removed from their neighborhoods. When the city, it should really be the city's responsibility, and residents are looking for permanent solutions to these problems, not another cleanup.
Yeah. And that goes to what we always hear from the city is that we don't have enough people to enforce this. So there's no enforcement of anything, but the burden is placed on residents and community organizations. So, and I say this all the time, we're held to a higher standard of making sure that we follow the city ordinances than what the city actually does for what they're responsible for. And so one thing that we found is the illegal dumping with contractors, placing concrete into the storm drains. So and they do it, I know they're not doing it in more affluent neighborhoods, but they do it in Black and Brown communities because it's the path of least resistance. And so they know that the city is not going to enforce it, then I can get away with it because, who's going to catch me and who's going to tell. I can use the example of when they were repairing the street in front of my own home. And so the guys took the road debris and dumped it on the private property side of a green infrastructure intervention that we're putting in, and I hit the fan. I went out there in front of the little bucket thing, and I'm like, I need to know who's in charge and who's in charge now. And you just scrape up road debris and just put it on a lot that's private property. And he's like, well, I don't see what the problem is. It's just, you don't live here. I live here, and now you've contaminated my site.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the lack of respect for the residents that live in Black and Brown communities is a stressor, and it's a hard one for us to fight. And just the disrespect of even indigenous wisdom and the wisdom in communities is a stressor, because it's like we're fighting the issue, and then we're fighting the folks who are supposed to be enforcing it, and all we can get is, we don't have the money for this, and pick a weekend. There's always something going on in Orleans Parish. Yeah.
Speaking a little bit to the coast. I sent an email about some of the Native American petitions to the UN that the United States is forcibly displacing Louisiana tribes because of the lack of cumulative impacts analysis, lack of incremental analysis, particularly of wetlands permits. I think the Army Corps controls wetlands permits. EPA is supposed to oversee it. EPA doesn't really do much. If EPA could even like sum up, here's the 10 permits that were in your environmental justice area for wetlands in this past year, just because I think the Army Corps says there's in the New Orleans district, which is most of southern Louisiana, there's like 12,000 permits a year, 12,000 decisions. So, and like there's one EPA guy in New Orleans. So it's like the amount of, and we're always asked to comment on each one of these. And I think there's just a feeling of this despair. My job is to ask people to comment to the federal government, probably multiple times a month. And they're living in situations where they have ongoing oil leaks, ongoing methane leaks, ongoing lack of remediation for our coastal wetlands. So if all EPA did was to monitor the incremental damages that happen and communicate them on like a annual basis, I think, and then if those were assessed, which the companies don't want to assess, you know, we would have more wetland restoration, which is something everyone wants, is more land. If you read that petition to the UN, coastal restoration is extremely popular because it's our everything. It's where all our stuff is. It's what keeps Louisiana inhabitable. So it's very popular, but because these incremental impacts are never summarized, and because each one is kind of even a trauma, where it's bringing up the despair that the United States has kind of abandoned these down bayou communities. There's never any like look to assess what's going on. So
Can I just ask a follow-up? Make
Yeah.
sure I heard you. So can you say a little bit about the connection between these multiple permits, lack of oversight, and the forceful displacement of tribal communities in these wetland areas?
yeah, that's their language. And it's human rights language to the UN. I'm not a lawyer. That's why I have to punt to the thing that they wrote because they wrote it with a very smart lawyer. But basically, we know they're supposed to be enforcing these wetland permits. We know they have them for the 40 years that we've had the permitting regime. Because the oil and gas companies own the land. They are our legislature. Our legislature are contractors for the companies, right? So there's just a despair that when the federal government asks us to comment, it's like, well, y'all have never like there's 13 points of like the different things to do. You know, people ask for, and a lot of these are very small tribal governments asking for consultation rights. Of course, they're not federally recognized, so it doesn't happen. And even just the volume of federal permitting decisions that goes through a place like Grand Bayou, District 7, Plaquemines Parish, because there are many, many more wetland build permits going into a Black and Indigenous block group than the white part of Plaquemines Parish.
Okay.
So even if you look at the permitting data by block group, you can see it that again and again, the federal government is asking people to comment on these decisions to put very polluting, climate polluting, benzene polluting steel things that are constantly breaking into their wetlands. And people are just in despair that the federal government will do anything because we can't even get our drinking water, like the Army Corps controls these wetland permits. And the Army Corps has kind of written off these communities in Lower Plaquemines, especially saying their drinking water doesn't matter in the face of the United States being to ship more goods out of the Mississippi River. So.
Go ahead, Jen, because I'm trying to remember, I'm trying to just keep
Trying not
track of what I want to say, but go ahead, yeah.
Appreciate that. I want to build on Scott's point of abandonment, and I see a sticky from a previous conversation that says lack of development. Just to put a fine point on what Scott is saying, when the government knows that our sea level is rising, the Gulf of Mexico is rising faster than any other body of water in the world. The area around New Orleans has already, the sea level has risen by almost 9 inches in the last 14 years. And that is permanently, and that is going to get worse. When the government knows that sea level rise is that high, when the government knows that our homeowners insurance market is collapsing, which it is and has been, when the government knows that they are issuing permits for these companies to put carcinogenic chemicals into the air and water, which means that our homes are threatened, we can't pay to insure them, we don't have clean drinking water, when all of those things are known by the government, which they are, this is not in doubt, and the government has no plan to get us out or for mortgage forgiveness or to build communities inland or to even effectively encourage people to move, much less protect culture and community integrity as people are moving. That is a plan. The lack of a plan is a plan. And what that is planned abandonment. And that is a stressor on communities, not just because it is like our water is contaminated and we are afraid, we are trying to figure out where to move to, how to move, what to do about our existing mortgages or rents or whatever it is. But also that is an incredible mental health burden that no one is even affirming. It is gaslighting on a systemic level. So it's not just a lack of development. It is looking around you and knowing that your government sees that this is happening and that they are actively choosing to do this to you and your community. And that is devastating. That's where I think some of that despair comes from. And I will just say personally, you said earlier about telling stories. More often than not, the conversations I have with my family who live in Baton Rouge and my very close friends, many of whom are in New Orleans, is where are we all going to move to when there's no other homeowners insurance policy I can get, or I get priced out of my home, or the water keeps coming and it never stops. How do we convince everyone in the family group to move to the same place? Because all of my family are within an hour of me, and that is incredibly important to me. But like, where do we go? That's a real fucked up conversation to make people have. Excuse my language again, but it's a mess.
And I'll add with that, when you say that the plan is not to do anything and that is a plan, I think we just stumbled upon in our last conversation a big loophole of, when things are being, decisions are being made, residents and communities are not at the table. And so I'm going to ask you, are there any community representatives with the EPA that has real community participation in it, or is it a checkbox? So when you have people sitting at that table making those decisions that don't look like the people in the community, it's easy to say, oh, we can do X. Yeah.
I think this past administration has put more people on the ground in Louisiana than any other 4 years I've ever seen. And yet none of them live here.
Yep.
Yeah, see, well, that's a problem. Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, because if you don't understand the culture, the social norms, and the outcomes of decisions that's going to be made, then it's a problem. That's a real serious problem. So you're just checking off a box and saying that you participated.
PHMSA, PERC, EPA.
OSED, DOE. Yeah.
If any of them had employees in Louisiana, I do think.
Yeah.
And not just people they moved in here, but like people from here.
Yeah, legacy residential.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so what we stumbled upon is the selling off of state assets in the wetlands that nobody would even think to figure out that's worth buying, but corporations are buying it, entities are buying those assets that we think that don't have a value, when in actuality they're being strategic about purchasing these state assets that are in our wetlands.
And you talk to the Army Corps of Engineers, which is supposed to regulate, they'll tell you, or they'll tell me because I annoy them. You know, property is the law. We're talking about their need for the Clean Water Act, and they'll respond with, well, property is the law. So I do think this real estate data set that came out of proceedings on National Academies in 2020, I think it's NOLT or something, the raster data set for the entire country. You look at Louisiana, we have the lowest value per acre in our wetlands, right next to the highest value acre, which is industrial, which is absurd, because that's like if you're in real estate, the comps for that are crazy, right? And there's a big incentive for the landowners who are the landowners. Our legislature are like the landowner representatives. There's a huge incentive to industrialize those wetlands because that's easy money.
And I'll follow up with, as the wetlands go, as the wetlands go, that are barriers and protections for urban things like Orleans Parish, so there has to be a concerted effort to make that connection to the wetlands regionally through all the parishes. And we know that that's not happening because of parochial reasons about, I don't like you and then I'm the leader of this parish. And so it doesn't serve any of our residents.
Joe, did you want to jump in?
Sure. So the thing that I had was in terms of a more micro level stressor is that the identity of our neighborhoods are changing, and thus the identity of our city is changing as a result of, as Jane said, like the rising insurance costs, the rising utility costs, the prevalence of like urban food deserts that are, just all over the place, and really making it difficult for people who lived here for generations to afford it, just to exist.
I have heard more people say if my insurance goes up anymore, I might sell my house.
I'm in that boat.
Yeah, me too.
One more increase and we're already living on credit card balances and I'm paid well. Like, yeah. Everybody's in that boat. I don't know anybody who isn't in that boat. Figurative boat, maybe future boat. Okay.
Well, I'm gonna say because my house is 9 feet above, it's raised 9 feet above the street because of when I rebuilt post Katrina. I'm like, I'm not going through this again. And so my average flood insurance it's under $1,000 a year.
Flood insurance is only $1,000. It's my home.
Yeah, my flood insurance may be $435 annually, and then my homeowner's insurance is right at about 21 or 2,500 for the year. And how I got that cost down was to take less value on contents to be able to make it manageable for me to pay for it. I'd rather live in an empty house than to have to afford something that I can't afford. And then taking those adaptive strategies to lower the cost of homeowners insurance. And so that's another thing that people need to know. You don't have to take that high value on contents. And that really significantly dropped my insurance premium, and then having a fortified roof.
For residential. Upper Ninth Ward, I already undercut, like my insurance would not cover everything in my house, and my annual insurance payment is $6,500 a year.
Yeah.
That's more than what I pay in local property taxes.
Yeah.
And like my husband and I both work for nonprofits, like it's not, and even still, we make more than 3 times the annual income, the average annual income in the state of Louisiana. Like that is insane.
And it comes back to Army Corps decisions, because a lot of the new build in Louisiana is in wetlands on I-12. in
Yeah.
the white areas. In the African American areas, it'll be a new LNG terminal. In the white areas, it's massive new real estate development. And they won't build traditional, they won't build like Dr. Angela's house, it's slab on grade.
Yep,
In a swamp.
yep,
FEMA's pulling their hair out, like, what are you doing? Because they'll be
yep.
they'll be paying to buy up houses, and then down the block, there's a new development in 404 wetlands, and the Army Corps.
Right.
Is like, that's the local parish's problem.
Yeah, yeah.
But, it's because it affects all of the insurance pools.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Florida is our, what
But it
happens in
affects
Florida
everybody.
affects our insurance, so like, and then they're from the west in Florida too, Lee County down, same problem, so.
Yeah, and then I have the benefit, that's right, okay, and I have the benefit also of using those adaptive strategies such as solar energy, battery packs, hemp insulation, which is used in Minnesota and in Pennsylvania to lower my costs. So for a 2,800 square foot house, my monthly utility bill runs right about $135.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. I like to brag on that, but that's a part of my research too, yeah.
My annual monthly electricity bill is $450.
Yeah.
For a 1,600 square foot house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
So much.
Yeah.
Really.
Lunch right
Okay.
here.